the scuff of worn sneakers against polished. Marble had become Marco Santos's meditation, a rhythm that marked another 14-hour shift cleaning the gleaming headquarters of Ashford Industries. His calloused hands gripped the mop handle with the same gentle firmness he'd once used to hold his daughter, Sophia's tiny fingers, back when life still made promises it intended to keep. Now, at 42, Marco's world had shrunk to two certainties: keeping Sophia fed and keeping floors clean. Nothing else mattered. Not the executives who brushed past him like furniture. Not the ache in his lower back that never quite faded. And certainly not the little girl he'd noticed for 3 weeks now, sitting alone in the executive waiting area each evening, her expensive shoes dangling above the floor, her silence louder than all the corporate chatter echoing through the building. Marco had learned to be invisible. It was easier that way, easier to work 2 jobs, easier to attend parent-teacher conferences smelling of disinfectant, easier to accept that he'd never be the father he'd dreamed of being when he'd held Sophia in the hospital 7 years ago, his wife Maria's hand warm in his. But Maria was gone now, claimed by an illness that had devoured their savings and left him with a choice: drown in grief or swim for his daughter's sake. He'd chosen to swim even when the water felt like concrete. The girl was there again tonight. Maybe 8 years old, with perfectly curled blonde hair that someone had carefully arranged that morning, now slightly mussed. Her navy blue dress looked like it cost more than Marco's monthly rent. She sat with a book open in her lap, but her eyes weren't moving across the pages. They were fixed on the fountain in the building's atrium, watching water cascade over granite with an expression that made Marco's chest tighten. He'd seen that look before, in his own bathroom mirror. "Still here, Pequeña?" he said softly, more to himself than to her. He'd never actually spoken to the child. That wasn't his place. But tonight something was different. A group of children, perhaps 10 or 11 years old, wearing expensive private school uniforms, had gathered near the elevators, waiting for their parents. Marco recognized the type: children of executives, raised on confidence and privilege like vitamins. They'd noticed the girl, too. "Why doesn't she ever talk?" one boy said, not bothering to lower his voice. "My mom says she's the CEO's daughter, but she's like weird." "Maybe she can't talk," a girl with a ponytail added, twirling closer to where the younger girl sat. "Hey, can you talk? Or are you just stuck up?" The CEO's daughter, Emma, Marco had overheard her name once, didn't react. She simply turned a page in her book, her small shoulders drawing inward like a turtle retreating into its shell. But Marco saw her hands. They were trembling. "She's ignoring us," another boy laughed. "Guess when your dad owns the building, you don't have to have manners." Marco's mop stilled. He'd perfected the art of not seeing, not hearing, not interfering. In the dramas of people whose lives existed in a different atmosphere than his, but something ancient and primal stirred in his chest. The same instinct that made him check Sophia's breathing every night. The same fierce protectiveness that had carried him through the darkest days after Maria's death. The older children were circling now, their cruelty casual and thoughtless. One kicked at Emma's backpack. Another made exaggerated gestures mimicking someone who couldn't speak. Emma's book slipped from her lap, hitting the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the marble canyon of the atrium. Marco didn't think. He simply moved. "Hey," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd worked construction sites, who'd talked down playground bullies, who'd negotiated with bill collectors at 2 a.m. "That's enough." The older kids turned, startled to be addressed by the help. One girl's lip curled. "We weren't talking to you." "No," Marco agreed, positioning himself between them and Emma. "But I'm talking to you." "Move along. Your parents are probably wondering where you are." They scattered, muttering, their bravery evaporating in the face of an adult's disapproval. Marco watched them go, then turned to find Emma staring up at him with eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic, gray and deep and filled with unshed tears. He bent down, his knees protesting, and picked up her book. "You okay, Pequeña?" She nodded, but a single tear traced down her cheek. Marco's heart cracked. He thought of Sophia, who chattered constantly, who filled their small apartment with songs and stories and laughter that sometimes felt like the only light in his darkness. What would he do if someone stole her voice? If someone made her feel small? The sound of expensive heels clicking across marble interrupted his thoughts. A woman in a power suit was striding toward them. Her phone pressed to her ear, her expression harried. Emma's mother, Marco assumed, or maybe a nanny. But then Robert Ashford himself appeared behind her, the CEO in his impeccable gray suit, his face creased with the particular exhaustion of a parent who'd been searching. "Emma!" Ashford's voice cracked with relief. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside his daughter, without regard for his $1,000 suit. "Baby, I'm so sorry. The meeting ran late. I told Claire to stay with you." He looked up at Marco. "Thank you for watching her." "I wasn't," Marco began, but Emma was pulling on her father's sleeve, gesturing frantically. She pointed at the elevator area, then at Marco, her hands moving in quick, precise patterns Marco didn't understand. Ashford's expression darkened as he watched his daughter's signing. "Someone was bothering you? Who?" His eyes found Marco's. "Did you see what happened?" Marco could have lied. Should have, probably. The parents of those kids likely paid Ashford millions in contracts. But he thought of Emma's trembling hands, of Sophia waiting at home with their neighbor Mrs. Chen, doing homework at a kitchen table held together with duct tape and prayers. "Some older kids," Marco said quietly. "They were teasing her, making fun because she doesn't speak. I just asked them to leave." Ashford stood slowly, and for a moment, Marco saw past the CEO exterior. To the father underneath, the same fear and fury that Marco felt every time someone underestimated Sophia because of their circumstances. "Thank you," Ashford said, and his voice was rough. "Emma has selective mutism. She hasn't spoken outside our home since my wife died 2 years ago. Most people don't," he swallowed. "Most people don't bother to be kind." The words hung in the air between them. 2 fathers, 2 daughters, 2 different worlds connected by the same grief and love. Emma was tugging her father's sleeve again, signing something insistent. Ashford's eyebrows rose. "Emma wants to tell you something." The girl approached Marco, her movements tentative. Then she did something that made his breath catch. She pointed at his worn sneakers. Then at her own expensive Mary Jane's. She made a walking gesture, then pointed at him again. Marco looked at Ashford, confused. "I don't understand." "She wants you to let her step on your shoes," Ashford translated, his voice suddenly thick. "It's something my wife used to do, dance with Emma by letting her stand on her feet. Emma hasn't asked anyone to do it since—" He couldn't finish. Marco felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening in a house that had been locked too long. He looked down at this little girl who lived in a world of silence, who'd lost her mother just as Sophia had, who was just as lonely despite the marble and the money and the powerful last name. "It would be my honor," he said softly. He positioned his feet, and Emma carefully stepped onto his worn sneakers, her small hands gripping his as he began to sway gently, dancing without music in the empty atrium. She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd noticed her, Emma smiled, really smiled, her whole face transforming with a joy so pure it made Marco's eyes burn. When they finished, Ashford was wiping his own eyes unashamedly. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You gave her something back that I thought was lost forever." Marco shook his head. "I have a daughter, too. Sophia, she's 7. I just did what I'd want someone to do for her." What happened next unfolded like a dream. Ashford learned about Marco's 2 jobs, about Sophia, about the impossible, mathematics of single parenthood, in a city that devoured the vulnerable. Within a week, Marco had a new position, facility manager, with a salary that didn't require him to choose between Sophia's school supplies and groceries. Within a month, Emma was joining Sophia for playdates, the 2 girls communicating in a language beyond words, building fairy houses in the park, while their fathers talked about loss and hope and healing. But the real gift came 3 months later, when Emma spoke her first public words in 2 years. She was at their apartment, building a tower with Sophia, when she suddenly said clear as bells, "Your dad is magic." Sophia had looked at Marco with the same wonder. She'd shown at 5 when she still believed he could fix anything. "He is, isn't he?" Marco, standing in his small kitchen with tears streaming down his face, finally understood what Maria had tried to tell him in those last days. "It's not about the life you give her," she'd whispered. "It's about the person you show her how to be." He'd been so focused on what he couldn't provide that he'd forgotten what he could. Kindness, courage, the strength to stand up for someone who couldn't stand for themselves. He'd shown Sophia that wealth wasn't measured in marble floors and corner offices, but in the simple act of making space on worn sneakers for a lonely child to dance. 2 fathers, 2 daughters, 2 worlds that should never have touched, brought together because one man remembered that the most powerful thing anyone can offer is humanity, and sometimes that's worth more than all the riches in the world.